So, welcome everyone to another episode of Off Limits. Our guest this time at the end of the year is Ambassador KP Fabian, who has held many positions in the Indian Foreign Service and has been posted in a host of nations: Madagascar, Austria, Sri Lanka, Canada, Finland, Qatar. Thank you for joining us. So, this is going to be a kind of year ender. So we are going to pick your brains to identify some of the issues that have had an impact on global geopolitics, and also, of course, a little bit on Indian foreign policy we'll come to at the end of the thing. So what would you say, apart from the Ukraine war, which probably will head your list as well, are the events that would have long-term repercussion, or at least that we will see more of in 2023 next year?
Let me get your question right. You said apart from the Ukraine war, or did you say?
No, of course, also Ukraine war. I said that is probably what you're going to definitely say, but
yes,
others, yeah.
I think we need to start with the Ukraine war.
Yes.
Which, as we all know, there was no Christmas pause. In fact, even during World War I, the British and German soldiers enforced local truces, and they exchanged during Christmas greetings and cake.
Right.
And as we know, in ancient Greece, when the Olympic Games were to start, the war stopped. And in ancient India, Mahabharata war, the war stopped, the fighting stopped when the sun went down. Now, not because they did not have what is called the night vision, quote unquote, the technology which makes you bomb, targets even during the night. No, it is because in India and in ancient Greece, they had the moral vision, and that is what is lacking in our times. And coming to the Ukraine war, I would say that while it is true that on the 24th of February this year, Russia started the shooting, we have to look at the background to it in depth. And one of the reasons, not the only reason, because for any war, you can't just say that there is one reason or two reasons.
Absolutely.
Now, in this case, the bad chemistry between President Biden and President Putin is, I'm sorry to say, is one of the major causes of the war, because when President Putin wanted diplomatic negotiations in the middle of December 2021 and sought security guarantees, even sent, draft treaties to Washington and to Brussels. President Biden, instead of responding in the classical diplomatic way, he responded through what one may call public diplomacy.
Right.
He said, Ukraine has every right to ask for NATO membership, and NATO has every right to keep an open door. He forgot that in 1962, President Kennedy did not say that Cuba had every right to choose its defense policy, did he? No.
Absolutely.
He said, you cannot have missiles too close to my border. Ditto. It's the same historical context is there.
But very deliberately so, no, Ambassador? I mean, this seems to be Biden's war. Every president who comes to to the US seems to have their own war and create their own area, new area for military conflict. And this seems to be Biden's. In the sense of containing China, the whole argument being Russia, weaken China, the whole Asian geopolitics, right?
No, it's like this, American policy begetting a war.
Yes.
You can see that in 1991, that is, Saddam Hussein was fooled into walking into Kuwait, based on the belief that America will do nothing against him. Because 26th of July, Ambassador April, I'm forgetting her surname, Gillespie, April Gillespie, told Saddam Hussein, I am under instructions to tell you, Mr. President, that my instructions are to deepen and strengthen our bilateral relations, and we are not interested in intra-Arab disputes.
Right. I know.
So Saddam Hussein got it all wrong.
Yes.
You see? And America got the chance to send its troops to that part of the world, which they have been wanting to do for a long time. And as you know, Schwarzkopf, the
Yes,
guy
yes.
who was heading
Yes,
the Central Forces,
yes.
he had told the Gulf monarchies that Iraq was going to invade. He had told them about 4 or 5 months ago.
Right.
Okay. And even Afghanistan, you see, America fooled Russia, Soviet Union into coming into Afghanistan by sending in special forces.
Yes.
And the government in Kabul got it all wrong. They thought they were in imminent danger. They went to Moscow, and again Brezhnev, without proper consultations, he sent in his army. And then you know what happened? 24th of December 1979, Brzezinski sends a telegram to Carter. Hey, we have got it. We have landed them in their Vietnam.
Right.
So,
right.
This is nothing new.
So Ukraine has done that now, you would say?
Pardon?
Would you say that the Ukraine president has done a similar thing?
I'll put it this way. 3 men are responsible for this war. Okay?
Right.
And these are Putin, Biden, and Zelensky.
Yes.
Zelensky, without understanding geopolitics, came to the conclusion that America will guarantee Ukraine's territorial integrity against Russian aggression. I'm saying this because there was a document signed on the 11th of November 2021 when the Ukrainian foreign minister visited Washington, and that is called Charter of Strategic Partnership, where America in so many words guarantees the territorial integrity of Ukraine against Russian aggression. This is more, this is stronger than even the Article 5 of NATO, because Article 5 says that each member state will respond in accordance with its constitutional procedure and all that. This is almost automatic.
Right.
So Zelensky was of the view that Russia will not strike. You see? And well, Biden, he wanted this invasion to happen. He was following it. In fact, in October 2021, there was a meeting of the NSC, National Security Council, in the White House, where he was told in so many words that Russia is planning to invade. That was in October. Did Biden think in terms of getting in touch with Putin and asking him, why do you want to do it? This is what I'm told. But tell me, are you really going to do it? No, he didn't do that. And then, as I told you, they signed this partnership charter. Okay. So in other words, Biden was very keen that this should happen.
Right.
While I'm not, let me also make it very clear. I'm not justifying the military invasion of a member state of the United Nations. You know what I mean? That is wrong.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That is wrong.
That is very clear. Yes. No, but the thing is that also now it's very clear that the Americans and the Russians have moved away from the brink of what was seemingly going to be a third world war, and all kinds of doomsday predictions were being made. And it seems to be a war now that continues to bleed.
Yes, it's a war of attrition. And I'm afraid this so-called Patriot missile, which shield, which America has now promised. And
Yeah.
mind you, they have promised it now, but it will be operative only by the spring.
Right.
First, they have to source it from where. Then they have to train the people.
Right. So
In
they're
other
going
words,
to.
in other words, during the winter, when the Russian attack on the power grid continues, there will be no relief. That's
Right.
point number one. Point number two is that they are getting just one battery, which can take care of, say, Kiev, the capital, 60 kilometers, square kilometers, or even 100. Okay. And even that, you see, one missile will cost you about $3 million.
Right.
So against an Iranian missile which costs $50,000, you are going to use a $3 million counter missile, and one battery can have 16 into 12, I think. That's the maximum. Okay, so you can calculate the arithmetic. It'll all be over.
Yeah. But as one of the last questions on the Ukraine thing of it has it sort of, I mean, of course, the relations between Russia and Biden and America have been strained, etc. But has it also weakened NATO in the sense the unity of NATO that we saw in the latter years in Afghanistan? Do you feel that there's been a weakening because of the economic impact and the political impact of the war on Europe?
I would tend to agree with you. In fact, the very fact that they go on talking endlessly about strengthening NATO, that Putin wanted to weaken it, now Finland and Sweden are going to join, and all that,
Right.
itself shows that there is weakening. In fact, the weakening is not only NATO, but I would say that, the transatlantic solidarity.
Right.
Because Europeans are saying, well, you wanted us to impose sanctions on Russia. We have done it. It is hurting us, but it's not hurting you. In fact, it is benefiting you because we have to buy more energy from you at
Right.
a higher price. And
Right.
it is our economy which is in recession,
Right.
not yours. So we are paying the price. So what sort of solidarity is this?
Right. So we are going to see more of this war in the new year, and it'll probably cover the whole year in the manner that it's proceeding, right?
Well, let's hope not, in the sense that my hope, not my analysis, is that after the winter, Europeans will be in a more chastened mood. And also don't forget the Ukrainian refugees, that also is wearing thin. In United Kingdom alone, about 2,958 Ukrainians are registered as homeless.
Crazy, yeah.
So we have to look at it. Let's see.
Let's see how it moves.
Sooner it ends, the better for not only for Ukraine, not only for Russia, not only for Europe, but for the entire humanity.
Right. So the second most important global happening for me would be the protest of the women in Iran. But what do you think?
Well, I had a posting there way back.
Yeah.
I was there in 1976 when I went there as first secretary.
Right.
At that time, Shine Shah was at the height of his glory.
Yes,
He was celebrating 2500th anniversary of the empire. Well, when I left, he was looking for a roof over his head, and he was probably in Egypt. No, he was already in the United States.
Right.
Going to be. Now, it's like this. When I was there, some Iranian women had, burqa and all that. But most of them whom we met in diplomatic parties and all that, they were in Western style. One would have thought one were in Paris. They were so beautifully, fashionably dressed, you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is that this is not part of Iran. And this is at most unnecessary, nor is it part of Islam, as you know better.
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
This is happening is what I call is a patriarchy at its worst. That is the belief of the man, whether father, brother, son, grandfather, uncle, that he has to control the mother, sister, daughter, niece, whatever it is. This is patriarchy at its first, and there is absolutely no need for moral policing and all that. Absolutely absurd, and I'm so, what shall I say, distressed to see what is happening in Iran, and I
I
hope.
saw a video yesterday or a couple of days ago because a lot of the male students had come out in support, or the men had come out also in support. Now, the arrests have been huge, right? Apart from the deaths.
Absolutely, absolutely. But people have asked me whether what will happen to the regime. My view is that until the security forces refuse to shoot at their brothers and sisters, when I was there in 78, there will be huge demonstrations, men and women, and the security forces will be there on one side. My apologies. Then women will go and carry a rose and give it to each of the security forces. And they accepted it. They were, of course, flattered to get the attention. Well, the gist of it was that as an onlooker, I could see they were not going to shoot. You see? Now, if that happens, if the security forces come to that stage, then of course the regime might fall. In fact, when I was there, if I may say so, lots of young people came to me, Western educated, engineers, managers. You know what they wanted? A copy of the Indian Constitution. Because they told me, Mr. Fabian, you have a strong democratic constitution. Of course, they said it even when there was emergency.
So you had seen the transition. I mean, it was controlled almost by the American and their puppet in Iran, the Shah. Then after this, it went straight into a very regressive regime. If this regime topples, it has definitely been weakened because it's not being able to take the kind of action one would have expected from the autocratic regime to take against its people. But if it does, and it is toppled, do you see the possibility of a more democratic government in Iran?
The problem is that, any such movement for and towards democracy requires some leadership. Now we do not know. I'm sure there are leaders. Only thing is that how active they are. Many of them are outside Iran.
Right.
So the leadership is required. But my view is that if the regime falls, there is a good chance. I mean, in politics, nothing is mathematical. There's a good chance that Iran will. And don't forget, Iran would have been a democracy if in 1953 the CIA had not intervened.
Right. Absolutely. That's sort of now a matter of record, but not really a recognized record. So what about, I'm going to stay in the region for a bit. So there is a women-led movement, which is at the moment in Iran actually, sort of threatening might be a strong word, but definitely one of the factors that is going to influence the future of Iran and hence the region, right? Can we say it like that?
Yes.
Okay. So then let's just move to Afghanistan, because, this whole politics that we have seen and the world control, and then the sudden, the wars and the destruction and the death and the occupation, all against the Taliban and to finish the Taliban. And then you have the Americans moving out, bringing the Taliban to power and actually supporting the Taliban regime. And whenever anybody coughed about it, they would say, oh, well, they have promised us that they're going to be different, they're going to give women equal rights. But now you're seeing what's happening with the ban on women's education. So this was expected, right? Because India's been watching, you've been in a diplomat, and India's been very, very closely in touch with Afghanistan and could have predicted this right at the beginning.
I agree, but we still don't know all the facts. But I will put across a tentative theory.
Okay.
And that is that among the Taliban, there were at least two schools. One school of those who remained in Afghanistan, the other who went to Qatar and negotiated with the Americans. Now, that second school was more liberal, more open, you see. Now, what happened was that after President Biden's, disorderly withdrawal, and when Taliban took over, President Biden should not have done what he did. That is, frozen their amounts and all that, their money. If President Biden had not done it, and if the Taliban leadership could have sort of, taken care of the country with their own money, without any charity, then that school of, the Doha school would have come politically at the top.
Right.
But when America did what it did, the other school came at the top.
Right.
And they are practicing once again patriarchy at its worst.
So then we are in a bit of a mess. You have this more aggressive group of the Taliban now in control, and you also have a situation where the other political groupings, even if they were the warlords and the North Alliance and everything, they seem to have been decimated.
Yes, so it is a very sort of, very distressing chapter in Afghanistan's history, which those great people do not deserve it. And for anyone to think that, you can imprison the 50% of your population.
Right.
You can't move without a male escort. You can't do this, you can't do that. Come on. This is self-suffocation. You are suffocating yourself.
Right. And now they're shooting the men who had walked out, the students and others who had walked out with the women students.
Yeah, I'm glad that Qatar has spoken out.
Yes.
And
yes.
Further pressure by such, sort of countries which have been intensely involved with the rise of Taliban's capturing power, maybe it will have an impact. In fact, all countries should speak out. I don't know whether India would have the diplomatic imagination to convene a conference
of this, yes.
Yeah, of neighboring countries all involved, interested in Afghanistan, Russia, China, Pakistan.
I'm going to raise that when we come.
And the P5, convene a conference and speak out.
Absolutely. So, to sum up, in a sense, when you're talking of the region of West Asia, would you say that, we've seen the decline of Egypt in that whole region as a big power? Turkey has also been contained. Now it seems to be Qatar. I mean, are we sort of reading more into it? And is it the football imagery that is influencing our opinion? But do you feel that Qatar is taking some kind of a lead now in the region politically?
No, what I was trying to say is that Qatar had hosted the crucial talks between the Taliban and the Americans.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And Qatar has also generously supported financially and otherwise Afghanistan.
Right. And Qatar is also home to independent media.
That's right. And they have a certain influence. They have a certain say.
Interesting. It's a country to watch out for.
In fact, India and Qatar should together join the convene a conference.
right.
We have some problems with Qatar, our Navy commanders and all that. And also how they responded to, what's her name, Nupur Sharma, no?
Sure.
And how they summoned our ambassador when the vice president was in town.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, we have invited the Amir of Qatar, that's all very good. But I think it would be good for India to take the initiative and convene a joint conference on Afghanistan, on this issue. And of course, all allied issues.
And we've got a lot of goodwill in Afghanistan. The people still have a lot of goodwill for India. So do you think India is sort of giving up on the opportunity, or do you think we're still sort of
India,
less involved than we were before? Definitely.
No, first of all, India initially took the wrong approach that, we won't talk to, we won't have anything to do with terrorists and whatnot. That was absolutely wrong. You see? Now, if our embassy personnel were in danger, I agree that there was logic in withdrawing them. After all, there's no point in, sort of losing lives unnecessarily. You know what I mean? But after that, even after withdrawing the embassy, there was a gap of time before we send some people, not a proper embassy even now. And if others can have their embassies, why can't India? You see? I also believe one of the first actions India should have taken was to have told the Taliban in public, listen, we are going to send personnel to run that Indira Gandhi,
Yes.
hospital, but on one condition, that we are going to employ a number of Afghan women and they will be free to come and work. There will be no restriction.
That's really far thinking. That would have been great.
You see?
Yeah. So we lost that opportunity. So let's see whether but you agree that we are not as involved as we could be in Afghanistan today.
No, somehow, Indian diplomacy lacks the degree of imagination which is required for diplomacy. You have to think a little out of the box. And you can't have this pet formula, we won't talk to terrorists and things like that.
Right.
Well, if terrorists are holding power in a country, you have to talk to them. What you talk to them is different. I'm not suggesting that we should talk to them surrendering. No. We should talk to them and ask them, what's the matter with you? Why are you not treating your women properly?
I mean, be in a position to where you can pressure and take a position. This other quick word, because I don't think he needs more than a quick word. This year we had the first South Indian origin brown person take over the UK, Rishi Sunak. Now, would you say that's just an aberration for the moment? Or do you think that that's done? Yeah.
No, I'll put it this way. I'm glad to see Rishi Sunak where he is, but I don't know how long he will last. In the sense that will he last through 2023? It's difficult to say. Because
but is this a big shift in British policy that they've actually accepted a person who is of Indian and South Asian origin and not a white?
Yes and no, in the sense that it was a decision of the members of parliament, conservative members of parliament.
And the first choice
if
was
the matter had gone to the voting by the Conservative Party, we do not know what might have been the result.
Right.
But
now, India, we are, the last bit, I would like you a little bit on Indian foreign policy. And obviously, our Indian foreign policy is not very visible in South Asia now, but more visible in containing China. Would you say that was right if we describe ourselves in 2022?
I'll put it this way. China is a difficult problem for us. Our approach should be to resist their encroachment at the border. I refuse to use the phrase line of actual control because nobody knows where the line of actual control is.
Right. Okay.
There is no map. There is no paper which says this is a LAC according to China. This is a LAC according to India. Then we could have put a line in between. Okay. So what I mean is that line of actual control doesn't mean anything unless where you are present or you are patrolling, have been patrolling regularly. You
Right,
know, but
right.
what the Chinese have been doing is that incrementally advancing their patrolling.
Absolutely.
And while our leaders have said we won't yield even an inch, I'm afraid the Chinese have taken more than 1,000 square kilometers.
Some people say 2000. I don't know the
Well,
figure.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So what I'm trying to say, there's no point in saying an inch because then somebody will ask you how many square kilometers make an inch.
Right, right.
To resist their military encroachment. But beyond that, we should not sort of have an anti-China, approach. It's not valid. That's the point. Now, this is very subtle, but I'm sure Indian diplomacy can handle it.
Right. So is it, I mean, when you talk of that we should have anti-China, there's always been that argument that China is our neighbor, we share borders with it, whereas the Americans are across the ocean, and we've got to keep our own neighborhood cordial and without so much animosity. Is that good tactics?
No, we have to strengthen our relations with our other neighbors. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And strengthen or improve in the case of Pakistan.
Right.
You see, because what we have to understand is that there's a deep nexus between Pakistan and China, a nexus which we cannot change. Okay.
Right.
So even with Pakistan, we should try to improve our relations, and that is why I had argued, and an article of mine was published in the Hindu, saying that when Pakistan was suffering from floods, we should have made a public offer to send tomatoes and onions. But across the road from Amritsar to Lahore, you see?
Right.
But nothing was done.
So Indian foreign policy, as the last question, Ambassador Fabian, we have lost some of our moral high ground, not today, not just this year, but for a while now, when we move to the pragmatic approach being better friendships and better relations with countries which give us more trade and money. Or is that too simplistic, what I'm
I
saying?
would say it is simplistic because you see, what is foreign policy for? It is to take care of your national interest.
Yes.
But my view is that national interest includes values also, because we want a world order which is based on values.
Right.
We don't want a world order where, war of all against all.
Exactly.
Or Malsinyaya, the big fish eat the small fish. We don't want it. You see,
Right.
India has its values, timeless values, and it is for us to promote these values. That's point number one. It is possible to marry the two, that is your particular interest and you are retaining the values. That is my point.
Right. And that's how we should work it out.
Yeah, and I don't think that enough effort has been made in that direction.
Right. So on that word, I will say goodbye and thank you so much for giving us this time and really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to speak to the citizen.
Thank you.
Who speaks for all of us.
Well, we hope so. All the best. Take
And
care.
happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.